Sir John Gates epitomises the life of a Tudor courtier. If one could reach the heights of wealth and power in this era, they could also come to a bad end. He was very effective in aligning himself with the right people, but managing to bring down upon himself the wrath of one of the Tudor monarchs would be his downfall. The Gates family were Essex gentry. His grandfather William Gates bought the manor of Garnets in High Easter, and the family lived there until 1582. John was born at Garnets around the year 1504, the eldest son of Sir Geoffrey Gates and Elizabeth Clopton. Sir Geoffrey was a justice of the peace, served as sheriff for Essex, and was present at the siege of Tournai in France with Henry VIII in 1513. After the French city surrendered, Geoffrey was knighted by the king. John was given a good education, and in 1523 he began his training as a lawyer at Lincoln's Inn. In 1533 he became a groom of the Privy Chamber of Henry VIII. The Gates were distant relatives of the Dennies, and John may have gained his position due to the endorsement of Sir Anthony Denny. Also, sometime in 1534, John married Denny's sister, Mary. In October 1536, he was given the assignment of keeping the peace in Essex during the uprising called the Pilgrimage of Grace, contributing 6 men for the royal army. John's services during the rebellion may have earned him the king's gratitude, as soon afterwards he became a royal confidant. John was a great supporter of the Reformed religion, and was instrumental in removing altars and despoiling many churches during the dissolution of monasteries. John himself came into the possession of some of the dissolved monasteries. These transactions, as well as others, allowed John to acquire extensive estates in Suffolk and Essex. After 1540, John rarely stayed at the family seat, preferring to live at Sion or Havering Abbey Bower, where he was keeper of Pyrgo Park. This did not restrict him from continued interest in the local government or prevent him from playing a role in East Anglia. His sister, Lady Dorothy Jocelyn, helped him look after his affairs in Essex while he was absent. On October 10, 1573, John was awarded the post of Page of the Wardrobe, making him part of an exclusive circle of royal servants. His wages are unknown, but he regularly received 40 shillings as a New Year's gift from the king. As Page of the Wardrobe, he inspected the king's personal weapons and noted the receipt of frocks, coats and gowns from the Great Wardrobe in the Tower of London. He paid bills to suppliers for gloves, nightcaps, silk hats, velvet caps, satin hose, gold lace, leather, swords, girdles, and horse trappings, among other items. John served as Denny's right-hand man and was put in charge of the king's coffer. He would oversee the king's liquid cash, golden spoons and jewels. He was also assigned funds to repair some of the king's manors and parks. In 1542, John first sat for Parliament, and he served in the household of Queen Catherine Parr from 1543 to 1545. For the French expedition of 1544, John supplied 60 soldiers and commanded over 3,000 men that remained with the king at Boulogne. In the years before his death, Henry VIII came to rely on Anthony Denny. Denny in turn relied on his brother-in-law, John Gates, to get things done and carry out important tasks. Denny and Gates had no compunction about using their exclusive access to the king to grant favours to those who petitioned them. Henry's eyesight began failing as early as 1544. Accounts show orders for 10 pairs of spectacles at a time from a company in Germany. This, and Henry's impatience with the demands of signing countless documents, required an alternative to his genuine signature. Beginning in September 1545, a dry stamp was used. A carved wooden block was hand-pressed on a piece of paper, leaving an impression of the king's signature. This would then be inked by one of the clerks of the Privy Seal, serving under Denny and John Gates of the Privy Chamber. One or the other of these men would witness the inking in of the signature and then record the transaction in a record book. This was supposed to be viewed regularly by the king because of the possibility of misuse or abuse of the stamp. At first, the stamp was kept in a small, locked black leather casket and remained on the king's person, but eventually he gave up custody of the stamp to Gates, surrendering the reins of power to those who closely surrounded him. Unauthorized use of the stamp was a treasonable offence. Those who had access to the stamp had to be formally licensed to use it, and retrospectively and formally pardoned. Denny, Gates and William Clerk were officially pardoned for the use of the stamp since September 20th, 1545, and all three men were authorised to use a dry stamp. The use of this stamp gave these men enormous power and patronage and access to the exchequer. It also permitted them to exact revenge on their political enemies. King Henry VIII died on the 28th of January 1547. John Gates rode beside the corpse of the king during the funeral procession to Windsor. Gates was a witness to the king's will, where he was named as a beneficiary, receiving a small token of £200, which was the value of around 40 horses, or 160 cows. The will was not signed by Henry, but the dry stamp was used. This has been a source of controversy ever since. John was to have an even greater role at court during the reign of the young King Edward VI. He became a Knight of the Bath at the coronation of the king, and in 1549 he was appointed Sheriff of Essex. The 9-year-old king's uncle, Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, served as Lord Protector during his minority. John Gates, now Sir John Gates, did not object to Somerset's rule, but he wasn't a partisan either. He did not participate in the plot to bring Somerset down, but he carried out the orders of his superiors and confiscated Somerset's property. After 1549, Somerset's power was severely reduced, and he was eventually executed in January of 1552. With Somerset gone, Sir John began to align himself with the new power behind the throne, John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Sir John was appointed to the Privy Chamber of the King in 1550 and held the dry stamp of Edward's signature. He was in constant attendance on the king and had complete access, reporting everything to Dudley, who relied on Sir John to transmit his wishes to the king. Dudley described Sir John as his special friend. On the 13th of July 1550, the King's Council heard news of his sister Mary's attempt to escape England. As Sheriff of Essex, Sir John was sent with some cavalry to stop Mary from going to Antwerp. Later, more troops were dispatched to garrison the ports in the area. After this aborted attempt, the council was more aggressive with Mary about allowing her to practice her Catholicism. Mary would never forget Sir John's role in this incident. In 1551, Sir John was made Vice-Chamberlain of the household and Captain of the King's Guard, given a seat on the Privy Council, and granted lands worth £120 per annum. Sir John was very diligent in his work, and on the 7th of July 1552, he was made Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. In January of 1553, King Edward was beginning to show the signs of his last fatal illness. Moreover, he was very concerned about the succession because he didn't want his Catholic sister Mary to become queen as the laws required. He believed Mary would undo all the Protestant religious reforms which had advanced during his reign. It is unclear who originated the idea of the devise which Edward created, casting aside his sisters and naming his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as his successor. Although Sir John had access to the king, this did not necessarily mean he was his confidant, yet Dudley and Lady Jane Grey hinted that Sir John was the mastermind of the devise. To this day, the question remains as to who instigated the plan. Whether Sir John was involved or not, he was loyal to the king, supported the devise, and carried out the orders of his superiors. He was Dudley's agent in the Commons of Parliament, in an effort to engineer the passage of a bill altering the succession as laid down by King Henry VIII's Act of 1544. Unfortunately, King Edward died on the 6th of July, 1553, before the bill was approved by Parliament, thus creating a succession crisis. Edward's death was kept secret for 3 days. The day after the king died, Sir John reportedly had to remind Dudley to send men to capture Mary. On day 3, Captain of the Guards Sir John told his subordinates of the dead king's wishes and took possession of the Tower of London. Dudley had his daughter-in-law, Lady Jane Grey, proclaimed Queen on July 10th. However, the council had underestimated Mary. She consolidated her power in East Anglia and gathered an army to defend her right to the throne. On July 14th, a nervous council sent Dudley with troops to combat Mary's army and secure her person. That same afternoon, Sir John and Sir Thomas Palmer left with 500 men. However, on the way to Cambridge, there was a rumour that Sir John had been killed and that his men backed Mary. Support for Jane Grey melted away, and Mary was victorious with no bloodshed. Gates, Dudley and others were arrested in Cambridge and escorted back to London, entering the Tower on July 25th as prisoners of Queen Mary. The newly proclaimed Queen arrived in London on the 3rd of August. By this time, she had already decided who would be condemned to die for supporting Jane Grey. Of course, she never forgot Sir John's role in preventing her attempt to escape, and his fate was sealed. On August 19th, Sir John and his brother Henry, Andrew Dudley and Sir Thomas Palmer went on trial and were found guilty of treason. His punishment was to be hanged, drawn and quartered, but this was commuted to beheading by the Queen. Dudley had been brought to trial the day before, found guilty and condemned to death. Dudley decided to accept the Catholic faith and requested a priest, possibly in hope of saving himself. Sir John followed his lead on the next day. Dudley's son, the young Earl of Warwick, and Gates observed Mass at St. Peter ad Vincula. Gates confessed, "We have been out of the way for a long time, and therefore we are worthily punished. And, being sorry therefore, I ask God forgiveness, therefore most humbly, and this is the true religion." Despite both having accepted Catholicism, Dudley and Gates were still led from the Tower to the scaffold on Tower Hill. Before their execution, Dudley and Gates exchanged a few words. The Duke stated, "Sir John, God have mercy upon us, for this day shall end both our lives, and I pray you forgive me whatsoever I have offended, and I forgive you with all my heart, although you and your council was a great occasion hereof." Sir John Gates replied saying, "Well, my lord, I forgive you as I would be forgiven, and yet you and your authority was the only original cause of all together. But the Lord pardon you, and I pray you forgive me." After they paid their respects to each other, Dudley proceeded. The crowd gathered to watch the executions has been estimated at 10,000. Dudley was executed first. Sir John came forward and acknowledged his offences and asked the people to pray for him. He had been given £10, 14 shillings and 4 pence to distribute as alms. He refused a kerchief for his eyes and laid his head on the block. It took 3 blows to strike his head off. He was 49 years old at the time of his death, and was then laid to rest in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. Throughout his life, Sir John Gates had acquired many valuable monastic properties, as well as the manors of Rivenhall and Shalford in Essex, estates in Hertfordshire, Norfolk and Northamptonshire. The value of these properties was estimated to be around £13,600. An act confirming his attainder was passed a year after his death, and most of these properties were confiscated by the Crown. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Sir John Gates. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment down below. And if you're new, why not subscribe? Make sure to have notifications turned on so you can get all my uploads as soon as they're released. And as always, if you have any suggestions, please send me an email, which is in the description, or send me a message to my Instagram, which is also in the description. Anyway, I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks!